Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, he is the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, and somebody I actually name-checked on Sunday with Senator Schumer, and he joins me now. Senator Reed, how are you, sir?
Good, Chuck. How are you?
I want to ask, because I am curious, I believe it was on Friday, after Senator McCain, the leader, the current chairman of your committee, threatened a subpoena to the Pentagon, suddenly Secretary Mattis got his tail over to Capitol Hill. Privately seemed to brief both McCain and Graham. Did you get a briefing?
No, I did not. I spoke to Secretary Mattis on the phone on Thursday evening. And Friday I was in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm glad he got over there. As you know, the Secretary left the following day for his Asia tour.
What do you feel, was this a brief? Let me ask you this. Both Lindsey Graham and Chuck Schumer said they didn't know there were 1,000 troops in Niger. Was that knowable by a member of Congress? Did you know this?
I did not know the exact number. One of the reasons we're having a classified hearing tomorrow is not only to look closely at what happened in Niger, but also to get the laydown of special operations forces in AFRICOM and also in other parts of the world. Frankly, most of our attention has been directed, without surprise, to the Iraq theater, Syria, to Afghanistan and other places, and recently, most particularly North Korea. But we do have to have this information. It's available, but we have to get it, and then get it on a regular basis. I think one of the reasons the Secretary came over to brief Chairman McCain was just to set up lines of communication, so this information is not on request, but it's constant.
Look, you know this better than anybody, since you also serve on the Intel Committee. I think you're a permanent member there, or ex officio, I think is the technical term there. There is a procedure where the Intel Committee is pretty good about sharing with Congress, you know, never enough, some members will say, but there is a system in place. I am learning there really isn't a system in place for you to be regularly updated as a key member of armed services, regularly updated about small theaters around the world. How do you plan to change that?
Well, again, I must give the chairman credit, Chairman McCain, because he wants to establish a procedure in which we are routinely briefed on not just the pending crisis of the moment, but on the areas where we have troops, particularly troops that might be exposed. And one of the other factors that's come into place is that with the dispersion of ISIS, calculated dispersion after their defeat in Syria and Iraq, now more theaters that were considered benign, places in Africa and other where we would send routinely special forces to train, et cetera. Now those theaters actually have significant threats.
I got to ask you, there's a part of this that feels like a wash, rinse, and repeat. We break up al-Qaeda. We make real progress against al-Qaeda, particularly in Afghanistan. And then all of a sudden, offshoots of al-Qaeda spread everywhere else. And we beat it back, and we beat it back, and now it becomes ISIS. Now we beat it back, and now you're saying the same thing. Are we in a never-ending war?
We are in a long-term struggle, and it is one of the ironies, and it is ironic and tragic in some cases, particularly the loss of these 4 dedicated soldiers and others around the globe, that we have decisively set back ISIS in Iraq and Syria. And so now they've gone from holding terrain to back to being a group that will stage spectacular attacks, classic asymmetric warfare, where they will have places that we don't know or we have lightly defended, and they will use them to attack. They'll also try to steer up terrorist activities in Europe and elsewhere. So this is how they hang on to their whatever's left of their power.
Look, I know there's a concern, particularly in some of these Central African countries, that they're sort of less governed, not necessarily ungoverned, but let's say less governed, and they can become these safe havens. But what is the line here, as far as you're concerned, about where the United States is the world's policeman versus the United States is worried about its own national security interest?
Well, I would hope that line would be the same. That is, that we're only taking action around the world where we see our national security interest involved. and hopefully we do it particularly with these ISIS elements, in a preemptory manner. We don't give them a chance to organize. But it is a very difficult line to draw. We have traditionally, this goes back for all through the Cold War, been training countries throughout the globe, providing forces, but again, in a benign situation. Now we have this confrontation of many countries that have been infiltrated or with indigenous forces are prepared to attack us very cleverly. So we are trying to get that line in order, that it's our national security, it's not gratuitous, we're protecting ourselves, and we're doing it in cooperation with others.
I got to ask you a final question. It's somewhat related to North Korea. Bob Corker, you could say one of the things that triggered his most recent criticism of the president is his concern about the handling of diplomacy with North Korea, or the lack thereof. He's worried we're headed to World War III. How do you share his level of concern?
I am very concerned. I was in South Korea about 10 days ago, talking not only to our military, but also to South Korean government officials, their foreign minister, their minister of defense, and their national security advisor. It is a very, very difficult situation. The administration has said that, and I think rightfully so, diplomacy should be our first effort, with, of course, military readiness always on hand. But the president has seemed to be sort of undercut Secretary Tillerson time and time again. The message over in South Korea is one of incoherence and confusion. Are we going to try to talk to the North Koreans? Are we going to, take dramatic, kinetic action? And one of the realities is, if there was an outbreak of war on the Korean Peninsula, it would be horrific, and unlike anything we've seen since probably World War II.
Senator Jack Reed, on that dire
Thank
note,
you.
I will leave it there. Always appreciate you coming on and sharing your views. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Charles.